Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really fundamental, I think, for anyone interested in how young children learn and develop. It's about how we actually understand, track their progress in early childhood development. Knowing what works and maybe what doesn't is just so key in these early years.
Absolutely. And our deep dive today, it really zeroes in on how pupil progress is currently being assessed in some specific Ugandan preschools. We're drawing on insights from a Kawa senior education specialist.
Okay.
So the goal is kind of to pinpoint the challenges, figure out what good assessment really looks like, and then identify some practical steps for improvement across all those areas, cognitive, language, social, emotional, physical.
Right, the whole picture.
Exactly. It's about how we can better see and support every child.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. The specialist talks about self-assessments from these centers, and right away, two big problems pop up. The first one is called Level 1, no monitoring. What does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, at this level, the basic issue is, a real lack of consistent tracking. Teachers aren't really recording observations often or keeping records of how individual kids are learning.
So it's more anecdotal.
Yeah, very much so. If progress is thought about at all, it's usually based on just informal feelings, not solid evidence. The key thing missing is that systematic recording.
So mostly memory and just a general sense. What are the consequences then if none of this is written down?
Oh, they're pretty significant. Without any recorded data, it's incredibly hard to spot kids who might be facing, specific learning challenges.
Right.
And similarly, there's no reliable way to know if the learning goals you set are actually being met. It's like flying blind, in a way.
Okay, I see. And the second big issue you mentioned, Level 2, single measure reliance. What's happening there?
Right. So here, schools are collecting some data, but it's often limited to just one type of assessment. Well, it might be an end-of-term test on a very specific skill, maybe letters or numbers, or perhaps a single readiness checklist they do at one point in time. The crucial thing is how narrow that data collection is.
So they're trying to get a picture, but it's, a very small part of the picture.
Exactly. This approach, just relying on one measure, it just doesn't capture the complexity of early childhood development. You might find out if a child knows their ABCs, for instance.
Okay.
But you completely miss how they're growing in communications or their social skills or, their fine motor development. It gives you a really incomplete, possible misleading snapshot.
So what are the wider effects then of these problems, whether it's no monitoring or just relying on one thing?
Fundamentally, it means teachers just don't have the info they need to tailor their teaching effectively. For each child's unique needs.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Yeah. Like a child struggling with fine motor skills might just go unnoticed. And that holds them back in things like drawing or writing later on. Or the other way around, kids who are ready for more advanced language stuff might just be stuck doing things that don't really challenge them. The key thing is you fail to personalize the learning.
That makes total sense. And I guess it affects more than just the classroom teaching, right? What about talking to parents?
Exactly. When assessment is weak, or, just not happening properly, parents get very little useful feedback about how their child is actually doing.
Which must be frustrating.
Hugely. And it can unfortunately erode their trust in the school. Plus, it limits how they can support learning at home. If you don't know what your child is learning or where they need a bit of extra help, it's hard to be a real partner in their education.
Okay, so we've got a good handle on the main problems. Now, the specialist talks about some specific worst practices they've actually seen. Let's start with this end-of-term pass-fail labeling. That sounds pretty harsh.
It is. It's quite stark. Basically, at the end of a term, a child is just labeled pass or repeat.
Just like that.
It's just like that. And believe it or not, that decision is often based entirely on how they do on a single, very simple worksheet, maybe recognizing letters or numbers. And crucially, this happens without any ongoing checks during the term. It's all about that one final judgment.
Wow. A single worksheet decides the whole year. Can you give us a real-world example of that?
Yes, the specialist mentions a place called Sunshine Play School. There, 3-year-olds get a one-page test on the English alphabet.
3-year-olds?
3-year-olds.
Oh, yeah.
And if a child doesn't get all 26 letters right, they have to repeat the entire year.
Regardless of anything else.
Regardless of anything else. Even if they're great at counting or really good with building blocks, showing good dexterity, or, they play well with others, none of that matters if they fail the ABC test. The criteria for success are just incredibly narrow.
That sounds unbelievably demoralizing for a little kid, and it just ignores that children develop so differently across so many areas.
Absolutely. It's a really crude measure. It just fails to see the whole child and their diverse developmental paths. A child could be doing brilliantly in loads of ways, but just isn't there yet with English letters, and boom, repeat the year.
Okay. The second worst practice you mentioned was informal gut check observations. That sounds unreliable.
It is highly unreliable. In this situation, teachers are basically just relying on their memory and their subjective feeling about which kids are doing well. There's no structure, no documented observations, no records.
Just a feeling.
Pretty much. The assessment is just based on a personal sense, not objective information. The real weakness is the total lack of systematic evidence.
Can you give an example of how that actually plays out day to day?
Well, the specialist talks about Happy Hearts Nursery.
No.
Here, the staff might informally decide certain kids are bright, and then they tend to call on those kids more often in group time. Meanwhile, the quieter kids, or maybe the less assertive ones, they can easily just get overlooked.
Right.
And because there are no checklists, no notes being taken, any strengths these quieter children might have, maybe they're really empathetic or great listeners, those strengths just go completely unnoticed and obviously not nurtured.
It's like those kids become invisible, almost, even if they have real strengths.
Precisely. The lack of systematic observation, it just lets bias creep in. It stops teachers from getting a genuine understanding of each child's unique abilities and needs. What's missing is that objective, documented evidence.
Okay, so we've looked at some really concerning practices. Now, the specialist paints a picture of a worst-case scenario at a place called Rainbow Early Learning Center. What's going on there?
Right, Rainbow Early Learning Center. It's described as a busy preschool in Kampala, lots of kids, maybe 60 preschoolers, and it really exemplifies a deeply flawed approach.
How so?
Their only assessment method is a single quiz at the end of each term, just focusing on counting and naming letters. That's it. No observations during the term, no keeping samples of the kids' work, no portfolios. It's an extreme reliance on one very limited assessment.
So it's that single measure problem again, but maybe made worse by the large number of children.
Exactly. And the consequences are pretty severe. Kids who struggle with that narrow quiz, and often these are children who aren't native English speakers, or maybe they have fine motor delays that make writing hard.
Yeah.
They just get marked repeat. End of story.
Yeah.
And conversely, the kids who pass the quiz, they just move on. There's no thought given to whether they might need more challenge. There's just no individual attention or support based on actual needs.
And what about the parents in this scenario? What feedback do they get?
Minimal is probably generous. They typically get a one-sentence report, something like good or needs improvement. That's it.
Yeah.
No specifics about strengths or areas needing work. The communication is just lacking any real detail.
That gives parents almost nothing to work with. How does this lack of detailed data affect the actual teaching in the classroom?
Well, because the teachers don't have comprehensive info about individual kids, they tend to fall back on whole class drills. That becomes the main teaching strategy.
Which probably doesn't work for everyone.
Not at all. Some kids get bored and disengaged because it's not challenging enough or relevant. Others feel completely overwhelmed because they can't keep up. And the unfortunate result, you see attendance drop, and parents' confidence in the school just goes down.
It really does paint a worrying picture. It sounds like the system is actually getting in the way of helping the children it's supposed to serve.
Precisely. But the good news is the specialist doesn't just leave it there. They then outline what does work, evidence-based best practices, moving towards what they call a level 4 approach.
Level 4.
Yes, comprehensive and integrated assessment for learning. This is a really crucial shift towards much more effective methods.
Okay, let's explore this level 4 approach. What are the main parts?
Well, the cornerstone is multi-method assessment. This means moving beyond just one test or checklist. You use a whole range of tools to get a really holistic view of a child's development from different angles over time.
What kind of tools?
Things like systematic observations and anecdotal records. So teachers regularly jotting down specific examples of a child's language, their social interactions, how they're doing with motor skills, milestones. The idea is to capture all these diverse aspects of development.
So documenting those everyday learning moments. What else is involved?
Also, using age-appropriate checklists and rating scales. These track key developmental milestones like can they stack blocks, name colors, take turns when playing.
Okay.
And then there are work samples and portfolios, collecting children's drawings, their early attempts at writing, maybe photos of things they've built or projects they've worked on. This gives you tangible evidence of their growth over time.
Right, you can actually see the progress.
Exactly. And finally, photos and videos can be really powerful. They document learning through play, which teachers can then review and also share with families to show what the child is doing and learning.
That definitely sounds like a much richer picture than just one test score. What's the next key part of this best practice approach?
The next vital piece is formative assessment for learning. This really shifts the focus. It's not just about measuring what a child learned at the end. It's about using assessment all the time as an ongoing process to actually inform and adapt your teaching in the moment.
How does that work day to day?
It involves building quick, informal checks into daily routines. So maybe a teacher counts shells with kids at the sand table, or asks open-ended questions during story time to see what they're understanding. The key is using assessment to guide your teaching right then and there.
So getting instant feedback and then maybe changing tack based on what you see.
Exactly. Using assessment as part of the learning journey itself, not just as a final grade. Another key element is holistic coverage of domains. Meaning you make sure your assessment tools cover all the important areas, not just reading and math skills, but also things like science exploration, language development, social emotional skills, physical development.
The whole child again?
Precisely. Assess the whole child. You can't just focus on one slice of development in early childhood.
Makes sense. What else is important for level 4?
Collaborative record keeping is also really crucial. This means getting all the adults in the room involved, teaching assistants, other support staff in documenting progress.
How would that work?
Well, for example, one adult might focus on observing social skills during outdoor play, while another might be inside, noting down how kids are engaging with literacy activities. Then they share those different observations. It gives a much more rounded understanding of each child. It's about building a shared picture.
Like a team approach to understanding each kid. And the final piece.
The final element is regular reporting and reflection. This means setting up brief but focused parent-teacher meetings each term.
Using the portfolios.
Yes, using the portfolios, the checklists to discuss things. The focus should be on highlighting strengths, identifying areas needing support, and importantly, working with parents on strategies they can use at home too. The goal is continuous communication and partnership.
So it's this whole cycle. Observe, adapt teaching, communicate with families. Okay, now the specialist moves from these big ideas to actual steps for improvement. What are the concrete recommendations?
Right, the actionable stuff. First recommendation, develop an EC assessment framework. This basically means creating a simple, school-wide plan.
A plan for what?
A plan that clearly lays out which assessment methods, observation, checklists, work samples, whatever, will be used for each developmental area and roughly when they'll be used.
Yeah.
It brings structure and clarity to the whole process.
So everyone knows what's expected and when. Okay, what's recommendation number 2?
Second key step is to train staff in record keeping. You need practical, hands-on workshops for teachers.
Training them on what specifically?
On how to write clear, useful, anecdotal notes. How to use rating scales accurately, how to organize portfolios so they actually tell a story about the child's learning. You need skilled people to make the framework actually work.
Right, because a great plan is useless if people don't know how to implement it properly. Makes sense.
Exactly. Then the third recommendation is about allocating roles for collaborative assessment.
Ah, the team approach again.
Yes. It means deliberately pairing up adults, maybe a teacher and an assistant, or teachers from different classes to share the load of observing during the term. And then, crucially, having them meet regularly, maybe weekly, to review what they've both seen. It reinforces that shared understanding.
It really leverages everyone's perspective. Okay, and the final recommendation.
The last practical step is to standardize reporting to families. This means designing a report template that's easy for parents to understand.
What should it include?
It should definitely use visuals, maybe some photos or examples of the child's work, brief, clear comments about progress, and really importantly, suggestions for simple activities parents can do at home. This report should be shared every term to build that strong homeschool link.
So it's all about making assessment more systematic, more collaborative, and ultimately more useful for the child and their family. Now, to really show how this can work, the specialist gives this vision of success example. Bright Horizons ECD Academy. What are they doing right?
Bright Horizons in Wakiso District sounds like a great example. Each child there has their own portfolio, properly labeled.
What's in it?
It's packed with information. Regular observation notes capturing specific learning moments, monthly checklists tracking progress on key milestones, samples of their work from different activities, even photos showing them engaged in things like exploring science concepts. It gives this really rich, multi-identity view of each child's journey.
So, a truly comprehensive record for every child. How do the teachers actually use all that information?
That's key. The teachers at Bright Horizons meet every 2 weeks just to review these portfolios together.
What's the aim of those meetings?
The main goal is to spot, really proactively, which kids might need some extra challenge through enrichment activities, and which might need a bit more support in certain areas. Based on that review, they plan differentiated activities for the classroom, tailoring things to meet those diverse needs. It makes learning much more personalized.
And that collaborative assessment piece we talked about, how does that look at Bright Horizons?
They provide a perfect example. Say, during outside time, an assistant might be specifically watching the kids' social interactions, noting cooperation, how they handle disagreements, signs of empathy.
Okay.
Meanwhile, back inside, the lead teacher might be checking in on the kids' early writing attempts, looking at letter formation, maybe sound awareness. Then they bring those different observations together later. It ensures different aspects of development get noticed systematically.
And what about that assessment for learning the quick checks in the moment?
Yeah, they seem to have woven that right into their routines. For instance, maybe during sand play, a teacher asks a child to count their shells. They make a quick mental note, or maybe a written one later, about whether the child shows one-to-one correspondence, matching one number name to one object.
Right.
That quick observation gives immediate insight into their numeracy skills and helps the teacher know what to do next with that child, or maybe with a small group.
And how do they share all this great information with parents?
Well, at the end of each term, parents get a report that sounds really comprehensive and appealing. It shows off their child's artwork, gives a clear summary of progress using those checklists across 6 domains.
6 domains, okay.
And crucially, it includes specific, practical ideas for games and activities parents can do at home to support what's happening in school. They even run workshops for parents, like how to reinforce counting, using things around the house. It really fosters that partnership.
It sounds like a truly joined-up approach. Everyone, child, teachers, parents working together to support learning.
Absolutely. And the results they describe are clear. The kids feel seen, they feel understood, supported. The teachers can make genuinely informed decisions based on data,
Right.
making sure they meet everyone's needs. And families become real partners in education. It creates this powerful, positive cycle.
It really is an inspiring contrast to those earlier scenarios. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the single most important takeaway about assessing pupil progress in early childhood? What should our listeners really hold on to?
I think the fundamental message is that good ECD assessment isn't just, paperwork or ticking a box for regulations. It's absolutely essential for quality early learning. It's the foundation for effective teaching and for giving each child the individual support they need. It's really about truly seeing each young learner.
And what's the big shift in thinking or practice that needs to happen?
The critical shift is moving away from those overly simple or single measure approaches like the pass-fail judgments, or just relying on gut feelings. We need to embrace more comprehensive, systematic, and collaborative methods. And right at the heart of that shift is formative assessment, using assessment actively to guide and improve learning as it's happening, not just looking back afterwards.
Because ultimately, if these better practices become more common, what's the potential impact?
Oh, the potential is huge, transformative, really. By putting these kinds of thoughtful, comprehensive assessment practices in place, preschools in Uganda, and frankly anywhere, can genuinely understand, celebrate, and effectively nurture the unique progress of every single child. It really sets them up for better future learning and development. It empowers educators to unlock potential.
That's a really powerful thought to end on, and it makes you, the listener, think, doesn't it? Reflecting on your own early learning, or maybe the experiences of kids you know. What kind of assessment was actually happening? Did it help foster growth, a love of learning? And maybe think about how these ideas of comprehensive assessment could apply elsewhere, beyond just the early years. Definitely gives us all something to mull over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.